Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching Midday Report, where we bring you the main stories of the day as they're developing. Defense ministers from the NATO military alliance are expected to make pledges on Wednesday to buy more weapons from the United States and send them to Ukraine. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is in Brussels for the meeting and said that firepower, that's what's coming. We're now joined by our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins, in the Belgian capital. Good afternoon, Angela. Now tell us, what weapons are being pushed for at this meeting or at the current moment?
Yes, so we know that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has already used 2 billion euros as part of Pearl. That is the prioritized Ukraine requirements list to buy interceptors for Patriot air defense missile systems, as well as ammunition for those long-range rocket systems. So this is some of the weaponry that Ukraine has already used as part of Pearl. This is a scheme cooked up by US President Donald Trump in which NATO alliance members can donate funds to the United States, the US then using that money to send weapons to Ukraine. The need for more weaponry for the war-torn country comes as the Kyiv Institute on Tuesday released a report which stated that military aid for Ukraine fell 43% from the months of July to August. That is despite this initiative, which aims to bring more military aid for Ukraine. It really highlights the need for more cash required. This is exactly what the US Secretary for Defense Pete Hegseth and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said earlier this morning.
And there is now much more cash on the table. There is firepower coming out of our defense industry, which is so important. And we are doing everything collectively to keep Ukraine strong. But I particularly want to thank President Trump and you personally for your leadership and the whole team for the fact that NATO is now much stronger, more lethal.
Firepower, that's what is coming, we expect and is coming from NATO. And it was a historic summit just a couple of months ago, brought about by leadership of President Trump to say we need our allies to step up. And they did, and they have in those commitments. Now those commitments will soon translate into capabilities, which is the most important aspect of it. And one part of that, of course, is Pearl, is the initiative where European countries buy U.S. weapons transferred to NATO for the fight in Ukraine to bring peace to that conflict.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth speaking there at NATO for the need for those NATO military alliance to step in, provide the cash to the United States so they can send those weapons to Ukraine. We heard earlier this morning that countries such as Sweden, Estonia and Finland pledging more support, but there are countries within the European Union, heavy hitters such as Italy, Spain and France that have received backlash for not making any fresh pledges today. We need to understand whether others will materialize through the course of the day and if they're going to hit that $3.5 billion US deficit outlined by the Ukrainian president earlier, stating this is what is required until October to continue fighting against Russian aggression. But there's going to be a press conference in 10 minutes delivered by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, where we're hoping for more good news for those soldiers there in Ukraine.
Angela Skujins reporting from NATO headquarters there in the Belgian capital. Thank you very much. Speaking from the Oval Office on Tuesday evening, Donald Trump said he's, quote, very disappointed with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The U.S. president said that Putin should have won the war in Ukraine within the first week, but instead the conflict has dragged on for nearly 4 years.
I'm very disappointed because Vladimir and I had a very good relationship, probably still do. I don't know why he continues with this war. This war has been so bad for him. He's going into 4 years of a war that he should have won that war in 1 week. He's now going to soon be into his 4th year. He's got to really settle this war. And you know, they have long lines waiting for gasoline in Russia right now, right? They have long lines. Who thought that was going to happen? And all of a sudden his economy is going to collapse. And I'd like to see him do well. I mean, I had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, but he just doesn't want to end that war.
The battle for energy in Ukraine rages on, with Kyiv's forces hitting oil depots in occupied Crimea and Russian forces striking heating and gas infrastructure, causing rolling blackouts across the country. For more on this, let's go live to Ukraine and our correspondent Alex Hennadiy. Good afternoon, Alex. So what's the situation like on the ground? I imagine you're hearing lots of generators echo through the streets. And, what impacts have these strikes had there in occupied Crimea?
Yeah, good afternoon, Don. You're right. And we just heard from President Trump. He said Vladimir Putin does not want to end this war. And the evidence is plain to see here on the ground in Ukraine. We've had rolling blackouts in Kyiv just yesterday because of an overload to the energy system and because of residual damage to those energy infrastructure, civilian energy infrastructure, following a wave of Russian strikes. We know that strikes on the 3rd and 5th of October knocked out 60% of Ukraine's gas production. And as part of those repairs, that gas, of course, used in part for heating buildings as well. And those ongoing repairs means that the energy systems, the energy infrastructure, have to be re-regulated, hence those rolling blackouts. What does that mean in Kyiv and other cities? It means that your power will be coming on and off in your building. Nothing will be working for electricity. Your heating may drop out. The pumps used for water supply, public water supply, may also be turned off briefly, which means water pressure, if not water access, may be cut off. If you're taking the lift to go down from your building and a power cut strikes in the middle of that, you will be stuck there possibly for hours if you can't be rescued. That has become routine, not just this winter, but it has been the case in previous winters within Ukraine. We've seen more strikes over the last few days on the gas infrastructure of this country, affecting the power grids as well. 30,000 people in Kharkiv in the last few days without power. Those repairs, of course, ongoing. Big questions about Ukrainian air defenses being stretched thin by these Russian attacks. 74% effective, as General Syrsky, the top military commander in Ukraine, described them. But nevertheless, this will remain a challenge. That's not to say that Ukraine isn't hitting back. The largest oil depot in occupied Crimea still on fire 24 hours after Ukrainian drones struck those oil reserves. Of course, a very difficult fire to control. Also very difficult to get accurate information from the ground because that information flow so tightly controlled by the Russian authorities. Hence that description, Don, as you called it, is the battle for energy. The Russians hoping to freeze out Ukrainian people throughout the winter. Ukrainians still fighting back.
Yes, indeed. And, we haven't even made it to winter yet. Alex Hennadiy reporting from Kyiv. Thank you for that. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has stripped Odesa Mayor Hennadiy Trukhanov of his Ukrainian citizenship and removed him from office. The now former mayor has held a Russian passport since before the war and has faced many accusations of corruption. The port city of Odessa will now be placed under a military administration. Trukhanov is expected to appeal the decision.
Hennadiy Trukhanov was elected mayor of Ukraine's biggest port city in 2014. Ever since, he's been mired in allegations of holding a Russian passport. Recently, a petition to revoke Trukhanov's Ukrainian citizenship gathered 25,000 signatures.
Odessa deserves more protection and more support. This can be done through the formation of a military administration. There are too many security issues in Odessa, and for too long they have not been properly addressed. All effective decisions will be made. I will appoint the head of the military administration in the near future.
The Odessa mayor, who has effectively been stripped of his post by the Ukrainian president, says he will challenge the decision in Ukraine's Supreme Court as well as the European Court of Human Rights.
I have never applied to the Russian Federation for Russian citizenship. I have never received a Russian passport.
In Ukraine, the president has the right to strip people of their citizenships. And on Tuesday, Volodymyr Zelenskyy exercised this right. In the wake of Zelenskyy's decree, 3 people lost their citizenships. The mayor of Odessa, Hennadiy Trukhanov, ballet dancer Serhiy Polunin, and former Ukrainian politician Oleg Tsaryov. The latter 2 live in Russia. Dancer Serhiy Polunin, who has a portrait of Vladimir Putin tattooed on his chest, said in past interviews that he has always regarded himself as Russian. Following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the ballet dancer has actively supported the war.
Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó has described the attacks on the Druzhba pipeline as essentially attacks on Hungary's sovereignty. His comments, which are reflective of the Hungarian government's reluctance to give up Russian energy, were delivered in Moscow on Wednesday. The foreign minister is currently visiting Russia to take part in the Russian Energy Week conference. The Hungarian foreign minister went on to say that the country would suffer if it were to cut off from Russian energy. He added that the nation would not accept outside pressure when it came to decisions on its energy supplies. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Hungary has continued to depend on Russian energy. Hungary has also pushed back on the European Commission's proposal to phase out all EU imports of Russian gas and liquefied natural gas by the end of 2027. Deepening tensions with Brussels over Moscow ties. In 2021, Hungary signed a 15-year agreement with Russia to purchase 4.5 billion cubic meters of gas annually. The country's opposition leader, Péter Magyar, has also said that he would not immediately turn his back on Russian oil if he beats Viktor Orbán in the next general election. According to Magyar, that would be a gradual process that could last until 2035. And as elections in Hungary get closer, the opposition is highlighting Orbán's espionage operation in Brussels. Hungary's main opposition figure, Péter Magyar, announced that between 2015 and 2018, Budapest carried out espionage operations in Brussels. Magyar said the then Hungarian delegation to the European Union knew about the intelligence operatives that were stationed in the Belgian capital. Magyar was working as a diplomat at the permanent representation of Hungary to the EU at the time. In his post, he details his experience of, quote, strange figures with no policy expertise arriving in Brussels to assume covert diplomatic posts, end quote. Magyar added that individuals were likely working for Hungarian intelligence, gathering compromising information about both Hungarian and foreign diplomats and leaders. He added that he was spied on too. The espionage allegations emerged last week when the Hungarian investigative outlet Direct 36 released a report on the matter. Hungary's EU commissioner has denied any knowledge of the alleged attempted spying. An internal EU task force was set up to investigate the issue. And now we bring you a development from Russia showcasing that even the toughest governments cannot stand in the way of the bravery of a younger generation. Hundreds of young Russians gathered in the center of St. Petersburg on Tuesday to defy censorship by performing a banned song critical of the country's president, Vladimir Putin.
The protest-style performance came amid tightening restrictions on artists opposing the Russian state and its invasion of Ukraine. The crowd joined street musicians to sing the song called Cooperative Swan Lake. The song was outlawed in May 2025 when a St. Petersburg court labeled it extremist. The song was released by pro-Ukrainian rapper Noise MC, real name Ivan Alexeyev. Its lyrics call for an end to President Putin's rule and strongly condemn the Russian public's apathy towards the war.
Those who were singing in St. Petersburg, they are currently imprisoned, and I know the lawyers that are trying to get them out of jail. So it is even criminal to sing the songs of certain foreign agents. Although I must say that Noise MC is not a terrorist, not an extremist as of now.
Despite his work being banned on Russian platforms, his songs circulate widely via VPNs and YouTube, amassing millions of views and keeping his message alive among Russian-speaking listeners. Alexeyev fled to Lithuania in 2022 after the invasion, but continues to release music supporting Ukraine and honoring opposition figures standing up to Putin. The rapper himself was jailed in Russia back in 2010 for 10 days after mocking police corruption and brutality during a concert.
So they're not singing terrorist songs. They are just singing songs of a foreign agent, and they are already imprisoned.
Recent reports also show that musicians have become influential activists and symbols of political resistance. The Kremlin has repeatedly tried to suppress the music scene and punish its leaders. But despite the persecutions, the underground is showing no sign of being silenced. In fact, it is growing.
Spain has found itself in Donald Trump's crosshairs once again. The U.S. president has threatened tariffs and even hinted at expulsion from NATO, accusing Madrid of disrespecting the alliance over its low defense spending.
Donald Trump is turning up the pressure on Spain. Speaking at the White House, the U.S. president said Madrid's refusal to raise its defense budget to 5% of GDP to meet NATO targets could trigger new trade tariffs.
I think it's very disrespectful to NATO. In fact, I was thinking about giving them trade punishment through tariffs because of what they did. And I may do that.
But that isn't even Trump's toughest warning to date. Last week, he went so far to suggest that Spain could be thrown out of NATO altogether.
They're doing fine. They have no excuse not to do this, but that's all right. Maybe you should throw them out of NATO, frankly.
Spain currently spends just 1.3% of GDP on defense, the second lowest in NATO, just above Luxembourg. Poland leads the bloc with nearly 5%, followed by the Baltic states. Spain's defense minister insists Madrid is meeting its commitments, reaching the earlier goal of 2% this year, up from less than 1% in 2018.
We are meeting our commitments because the pledge for the year 2025 was to reach 2%. A very important effort has been made. We started at 0.9% in 2018. At this moment, we are fulfilling the commitment, which is 2%, and we will continue to comply. We are firmly committed to the Atlantic Alliance.
But Washington wants more, and fast. As Trump reshapes NATO's rules, Madrid now finds itself at the bottom of the spending chart and at the top of the president's sanctions list. And in true Trump fashion, confusion hasn't helped diplomacy. Back in January, he even called Spain a BRICS nation, leaving Madrid wondering whether it faced tariffs, expulsion, or a geography quiz. In this new era of pay or be punished, defense spending has never been more political or more unpredictable.
While in the Serbian capital, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that Serbia will soon be connected to the EU's energy market. She also added that the country has been invited to join the EU's joint gas procurement mechanism in order to secure lower energy prices.
We are connecting Serbia to the EU's energy market. This is the true guarantee